Okay, hello everyone. Never mind. Now, hello everyone. Welcome to Textile 2023 week 2 panel slash workshop 4, I think is that what we're at. Thank you so much for everyone who's joining me for resume reviews. We built this in last year as a way to give you all feedback on your applications to hopefully improve things on in the future, but to also, you know, give you insight into where some of us were at back at the stages that you all are in. So it's sometimes difficult to see us now. Like I just finished my PhD, so I don't even know. It's 2023. I graduated high school in 2014. So I'm like 9 years out from where some of you are at. It's difficult to compare. Is it breaking up a lot? Second. Okay, let's see. Is it still breaking up a lot? Can I get feedback?
I think you're good now.
I think I'm good. Okay, I turned off the AC. Hopefully, maybe that was causing noise issues. My Wi-Fi switched to quantum fiber on like Monday, which was why my wasn't on the panel. And I'm trying to move out and things have been weird. Okay, are we good? Okay, I'm gonna go with good. Good.
Yeah, you're back. It's not breaking up anymore.
Okay.
So
Oh, okay. Fingers crossed. I have been struggling with Wi-Fi all week. I'll drive to UW and steal. Well, I don't have a UW account anymore. I'll steal someone else's Wi-Fi. Cool. So the point of this is to give you insight into how we score resumes, as well as to give you at the end of the session, so probably like the second hour, those of you that are present, I'll do one-on-ones with your resumes and give you feedback from the committee on how we reviewed them. But also, I've been on resume reviews for almost all of the Nance Lab undergrads that have been into the lab. I've obviously gotten into grad school. I've reviewed resumes and CVs for quite a few applications, including at the PhD level. I was on a committee review a few times, and I was also on the faculty search for newest professors last year, and even like the search for the dean. So I'll just give you insight that I have from all of those things. And we can also look at my old resumes, keeping in mind I don't look at them and think that they're like the exemplary resume. So that's not why I'm showing them to you. They're more of like a realistic outlook on I still made it even if my resumes were okay. Any questions about resumes starting off? I think you all know what they are, but just seeing if anyone had any like burning questions. Okay, cool. Shall I share a screen? Where's my first one? I pulled them all up already. Please ask questions throughout 2016. I know that's not it. Okay, so my first resume that I could find was from my sophomore year of undergrad. I couldn't find my undergrad one, and we will just take that to be a heavenly sign that you don't have to see it. So components to a resume that all of you are probably familiar with, things like your education, things like work experience, extracurricular activities. I had you all put more aspects into your resume because I know more now. So when I asked you all to submit your resumes, there were more components to it. But this is realistically what mine looked like in my second year of undergrad, and I still got into a PhD program and all of that stuff. What is most important when you're at the high school and undergrad level is education. So that's always going to go first. Things I would do now on this resume to make it better. I actually don't love this font. I would do an easier font. I'm not going to edit it because this is for historical sake, but why would I do an easier font? So, what you need to think about when you are submitting your resume is that you are among a lot of applications. So, for textile this year, we had over 60 applications, and we gave every application 2 minutes each to review, which is not a lot of time. So, your resume is 1/4 of that application. So the resume, your two essays, and then just all the other details, like cumulatively, and for us to have a chance to respond. So that gives us anywhere between um, 10 seconds to like 35 seconds to look at your resume specifically. So the way that you want your resume to be is incredibly streamlined for your reviewer. And so that's one of the things where I'm not actually in love with this font. I don't think the font is make or break it, but it feels a little bit busy to my mind. And so 2016 Holly, I would have said to change that. Certain things that you can choose to do or to not do that I did choose to do back then is I chose to include my GPA. Some places are going to require that you include your GPA. Some places are not going to require that you include your GPA. That is up to your discretion about whether you want that information or not. Someone that's going to require it is going to include it. Now that high school is done, I definitely don't include high school anymore. So now, like, I think once you're around a junior year in undergrad, just completely ignore this. The way high school does show up on my current CV, don't get overwhelmed with this one. So I do have a CV. We'll talk about what a CV is. This is my current one. So don't compare anything to that. The way high school shows up is I was salutatorian. So that's the only time it shows up on my like post undergraduate resume type things. Back to this one. So I did choose to include my GPA back then. I think if your GPA is really good, it is likely to help you, but I don't think it comes into that conversation a ton unless the program has kind of like a GPA threshold where they're like, do we expect them to have over a certain GPA? I think that that's less important than most high school students and undergrads attribute to it. And I'll describe that in a few ways as to why I think it's less important. I think it's important you have like above a 3.0. So it's important that you maintain an average within your studies that shows that you're doing well. But beyond that, certain things like UW doesn't do a second decimal place, but Arizona State University does. Some universities don't do an A plus, other universities do. Some universities are on a bell curve, others are not. When you apply to graduate school, there's like a very long piece of information you have to fill out about how your university actually assigns GPAs. And that's more important than like the baseline of I ended up with a GPA. My current, though, after undergrad, I stopped including my GPA. And the only thing I include back on this resume with undergrad, where is that I got summa cum laude. And so that was like, that's an honor. So I include it. It's typical to include it in your education and training. I think once you're done with undergrad, no one cares about your GPA. Seriously, once you're into a graduate program, master's, MD, PhD, literally no one cares about your GPA. I have no idea what my PhD GPA is, just doesn't matter. I had to have higher than a 3.0 and I definitely did, but class is really not the most important part of graduate school. Some master's programs it is, med school, your boards are important, but PhD's class is really not important. Any questions about like the discussion of GPA? This is not, again, an exemplary example of a resume. This is just where mine was at, and I'm critiquing mine to give you feedback. Let me see. Anybody have any questions? What's the difference between a resume and a CV? That's a great question, and we will get to that, I promise. I have my first CV pulled up and we'll discuss them in just a little bit. So a CV stands for a curriculum. No, it doesn't. It stands for a curriculum vitae, and that's more geared towards research and academia. Other questions? Great. And then I don't honestly like Zoom isn't going away. Hi, Zoom. Hide video panel. Nope. Hide floating meeting control. On third year, I still included my GPA, but I did some formatting changes I'm not in love with. And then this was my senior year before I finished. I think this one looks better, but I also think it looks worse in some ways. So let's discuss that. Now Zoom is completely gone. Can you tell I'm out of practice? How do I get it back? I can't see controls. Manage, I can see manage participants. Chat. I've lost. Well, okay. I've completely lost my controls. Does anyone know how to get them back? I'm gonna stop share. I got them back. Okay, fantastic. Sorry everybody. I don't have to Zoom anymore. Share again. So that was my first year. That's just a conversation about GPA. It's your decision whether you include it. But at the top of all of your resume should be education, as this is what is most important. Unless, and this is what I asked for on your resumes, I asked for an objective statement. So unless you have an objective statement, then that often will go above it or like to the left of it, depending on how you're using your resume. So education, if you are early in undergrad, should include where you're doing undergraduate, as well as like what time you started. When you're getting close to graduating, you can also include anticipated graduation dates. So I started including graduation May 2018, because if I was applying for jobs, especially my senior year, I wanted them to know that I was getting out in the spring quarter and that they could see that. At that point, you can probably stop including high school, and then you want to include here sometimes any honors that you received. I think it's better now that I include these honors under the specific titles. So I have Arizona State University, and then the honors I received there were Barrett. The Honors College is pretty big, and then I was Dean's List every quarter in undergrad, and so I included that. That way it's like really connected to your undergraduate education. You can clearly see that I've just left high school off from this. Another reason I have a ton of resumes, and a tip I want to give you, is that you should tailor every resume to the thing that you are applying for. It's like in my resumes and cover letters, I had applied to like the Disney college. I had applied to an Imagineering internship. So I had like a Disney cover letter and a Disney resume. And I had a Barrett Mayo Clinic resume and a scholarship and an essay. And so I would actually tailor each of my resumes towards that job. The way that I find this is the easiest way to do is to keep a bulk resume. So to keep a resume that is multiple pages long, if you have enough stuff to be multiple pages, and then pick and choose what you're going to include for that specific application. So this was a resume to be a tutor during my first year of my PhD. So that's why I added on this like subjects line and how comfortable I am with those subjects. And these were subjects that the call for tutors was specifically asking for. You can see my old address. I don't live there anymore, so you can't come find me. And so I I chose to show like I was on executive board members. I also chose to include my time as an undergraduate teaching assistant and as a grader for calculus on this resume because it was for tutoring. Whereas those are here, but I don't think they're as highlighted. I actually think my third year resume was my worst one. I don't know what I was applying for, but this, don't do this. What's going on with these dates? Um, so another way to make it look easy, I think a lot of you did this, is that I would actually write justify my dates now. So it just makes it a lot easier for me to look at everything and contextualize it into time. So if I needed to, I could say, hey, this person has been at this workplace for 4 years, or they've worked a lot of places, but it's been for a short time for all of them. Why might that be? There's positives for working a lot of places and there's negatives. It really depends on your situation. So that doesn't mean one versus the other, but right justifying your dates makes that a lot easier. I'm pretty sure, yeah, I'm still not good at it, but they are there. I should really put these all the way to the right. I'll fix that. I still get jobs. Um, so dates are it. And then after education, so this is where it's going to change. I think now I would have called this professional experience, not work experience. But depending on what you're going to apply for, especially if you're interested, oh, I'll get to your question in just a second. Especially if you're interested in research, you might even split it between research experience and professional experience if you like really want to highlight something you did research wise. I think most of undergrad, until you have a lot of research under your belt, you can keep it all under professional experience. Um, we can talk about that more. Do you recommend arranging experiences chronologically or by importance? Experiences should be arranged reverse chronologically. So always your more recent one should be at the top. You can see it in my current CV as well. And the older one should go down to the bottom. And that's just how people expect to see them. If you want to highlight that something is more important, you can give it more lines. So like my undergraduate research has one bullet point and the others have three, with my PhD having three with multiple lines each type of thing. But reverse chronological is the way to go. If you have two things that overlap, they go reverse chronologically by when the starting date occurred. And you don't need the date, just the month and the year. If your extracurriculars are more relevant than your professional experience, should those come first? I don't think so, unless you're considering them professional experience. But I think it's okay, especially at where you all are at, to have a shorter professional experience section and to put more space into your extracurriculars. I think you can see this not on this one. This is just a bad resume. I don't know what I was doing here. Um, Oh no. So I didn't put a ton of extracurricular experience in, but it depends on and how you're defining it. I would still put it second, but I think it's okay if it takes up more space. Just because if you don't, the people might all of a sudden think in their brain, do they have any professional experience? Have they never worked before? Anything like that. Even in high school and undergrad, even if it's not in research, if you've worked, I was a waitress. One of my old resumes has on that I was a waitress. I did some other like jobs and things, and oh my gosh, I lost my train of thought. I was a that those things are great to go on there because at your age they show that you can follow management, you have some leadership, you can maintain a job, you can stay someplace. So even if the skills aren't necessarily relevant, that's okay. Each of you are still in the phase where you're learning all of those skills you want for your future careers. I hope that helps. Arya, I think I just answered yours. Um, Rithvi, extracurriculars are more relevant than my work experience. And again, I would just reframe what you think as relevance. So I don't think everything when you're in high school and undergrad, we do not like when people come into PhD programs, we do not expect them to have any knowledge in this area. I'd never done neuroscience before, I'd never done data science before. But my research experience, I had worked multiple jobs. I was a tour guide that worked out really well. I had a lot of experience talking to people. Those softer skills are incredibly important to show. So I would still put them first, but you can give them less space. And that's how I would do it. Um, so someone said, I do health occupation students of America. I find that relevant when it comes to applying to internships that are bio-related. Is that work experience or extracurriculars? Mm, so I would call it, so I would change, I wouldn't call things work experience anymore. I would call them professional experience or break it up into research experience and professional experience. And it would really be how you define it. I think if you wanted to call it professional experience, it would have to be like a paid position, or some internships are unpaid, like an internship. I do not think putting those things under extracurriculars makes them seem lesser to people reading your resume. I think that's an important point, to just add more bullet points under those things. So if you think they're more relevant, do like 1 or 2 bullet points under your professional experience, and then 3 under why you think health occupation students of America is more relevant. Does that help everybody? You can unmute if you want to as well. If you want to raise your hands, I can watch the participant list. Cool. So other things that we took away from resumes is just that insight that you want it to be really clean. There is no one right way, but you can make it too much. So just, I would caution towards plain and simple. Reasons you want to caution towards plain and simple is that a lot of times resumes are fed into AI or fed into text miners, and they're not going to pick up on really fancy formatting or really fancy fonts. And so it's best to keep it to a simple font. The world goes between, should it be sans serif or serif, or if it should be serif, if it should have these fancy endings. I never knew how to pronounce that, or not. I don't think that's going to be the big make or break, but it's better to stick to something that is simpler than to go crazy. My current resume, that's my CV, is open on my computer, is here. So this is my current resume, and it's also clearly not very current, and it looks a little bit it looks nicer. I aligned all my dates. I chose to go on the left. I think this actually looks really nice. I chose to do this like 2 column split because I think that it used the space better. That's a totally okay choice. Contact information, this is one of the areas where people are like, is this still relevant or not? We're still having conversations about that. This is actually my like work box, and so I kept it in case anyone needed to mail me anything, definitely including your email. And then I also include these 3 because they are professional. And I used to actually post on them, and then when my research got harder, I stopped. Don't include social media if they're not like a professional social media. You definitely do not need to have a professional social media. If you want to talk about that, that's fine. It's seen as a positive thing if you want to go into like higher up of academia, like a professor type situation, but it isn't something you should feel like you have to include at all at your rate. And what I mean by professional social media is that I really only post like, hey, my paper's out, or I'm doing this event, or I'm teaching students. My personal life isn't on there very much. I chose to have an objective statement for this resume because I think they're a nice introduction to you. I liked reading all of your objective statements. And then I put my education. I also pulled some goals over here. This is different than the objective. I was applying for a future faculty workshop with this resume, and so my goal was to become a professor. So please take me. When you're applying for grad school, in grad school, one of the things that's important to add is all of the organizations that you belong to. So that'll be an organization that you currently pay fees to annually. It typically says, it tells to your people who are reviewing your resume what conferences you attend. You do not need to worry about that. really at all, I wouldn't worry about it. But if you are in undergrad and you're involved in something like Biomedical Engineering Society or the American Institute of Chemical Engineers, go ahead and include it. The reason why AICHE is why I didn't put the BMES subtitle, but I put AICHE is that AICHE shows up on my resume and other places. So like I worked for AICHE and I didn't want to write out the whole thing. So that's the only reason why I use this acronym. But I would honestly put those on the same line now, but it doesn't matter. And then I belonged to Society of Women Engineers at that point. And I was also applying to a data science related thing. So I include data science. And then this is like something that's like up to you or not. Sometimes it's fun to have like a small out of office thing so people can remember, like, oh, this is the person who did this or did not. So I used to sing soprano in a choir, and I also in high school was the all-state female bowling champion in Arizona. I was really lucky on that. So people that go bowling with me all the time, I scored my best game ever that day, and all the girls that were really good at bowling had really bad days, and it worked out for me, and I won. That's just a fun fact. I bowled at 276. I was really proud of myself. Anyhow, so I include that because that's always like a weird thing where people are like, "Oh, you competitively bowled," and it starts a conversation. But I wouldn't like make a long list of those. It'd be like one or two things. Ideally, how long should your objective statement be? I wouldn't go over 3 sentences. I would keep it like pretty short and simple. The way I would think about it is if you were reading someone's resume, what would you want to know? And so it's really like, here's me, and this is what I want to do was my objective statement. Other things I wanted to point out about resumes, especially at your levels, keep them to 1 page. Do not go over 1 page, especially if you're told do not go over 1 page. You should not really, as a high school or undergrad, have more than 1 page of a resume. If you want to debate me on that one, I'm happy to talk to you all about it personally, but keep it to 1 page. Some of you can format better to keep it to 1 page, and some of you are including way too much detail to put it over 1 page. So you want to be at 1 page. You can have a longer resume that has other experiences, but when you're applying, it's likely 1 page. My mother, who's an accountant, she's a CPA, if you would know about accounting, she is now at the point where she has like a 3 page resume. She's had a whole 50-year career. She just retired. She has a 3 page resume. High schoolers, undergrads don't. Even I think if I were to make a resume now, I think I'd still make it either 1 page or 2 page, and that it would be based on the requirements. So even though I have a lot more going on now, I would still keep it shorter. How do I recommend formatting to maximize space? I can give you help on that one-on-one for those of you that would like feedback one-on-one. But I do think what I've seen that this 2-column format has been the most efficient with space. Why did I make my name 30? I don't know. I think this should be like a 20. And this, I'm not even a graduate research assistant, so editing this doesn't do anything for me. But I don't know why that's so big. I think it was a format I picked, but I do find that the 2-column optimizes space while still making it really easy for people to read. And for those of you asking about HOSA, I literally just labeled this experience and put it all in there, and I included this as leadership. You can change it up a little bit, especially on those extracurriculars. Cool. Any other questions? Anybody? I'll wait a second for some more questions. And then I will teach CVs, and then we will go into personal reviews. Font size, how small could you possibly make your text? Wow. I think this is 8. It's 10. I would not go smaller than 8. And I would only do 8 like if you had to. I wouldn't go smaller than 10. 10 to 12 is pretty standard. There are some fonts that are smaller, but if you're really getting down to the font size being your like make or break, let's have a discussion about other things that could be your make or break. And I also wouldn't mess around with your margins too much. There's research behind like a 1 inch margin is really clean for the eye to have space. Utilizing white space also makes things work out well. Cool. So yeah, that was my second year of undergrad. Third year of undergrad, I was really, I guess, lucky. I don't know. I worked hard. Maybe I figured college out, where my resume increased every single year of my GPA increased every single year of undergrad. So I kept including it. Um, do I think that really matters? I don't know. I think you want to show consistency uh in GPA, but if you're gonna show anything, I guess have it decrease. But if it decreases, have it increase, if it decreases a little, I don't think that's gonna make or break your life. I think I front loaded a bunch of hard classes and figured out what college was, and then after that did better. And then this was my one when I had first started. So I had some research experience. I really just did one lab for multiple years, and that was really important. Then I did a summer being a vivarium tech, and then I did an actual internship at a company, and then I did some jobs around Arizona State, and I also worked at a pet resort. And then I just had two clubs I was involved with really in undergrad, and that was it. And I got into graduate school, and I don't think that you need to have more than that, because I dedicated a lot of time to each of those things. And when I did interviews and chatting with people, I could really talk about how those things have impacted my career. Okay, I'll give a couple seconds for final resume questions. We'll get into individual reviews later, so don't worry. If you feel like it's like a personal question, you'll have plenty of chances. Anyone that I don't have the chance to get to today, I'll prioritize in email, and I'll send you back resumes back and forth. I guess my like final think of any questions, but my final comment is if your school does have resume reviews, send them off to resume reviews. I still send mine to my colleagues, other PhD students. They find typos, they find things that I could improve. Even just going over them with you all today, I saw like my dates are not right adjusted. I should fix that type of thing. Cool. Okay, what is a curriculum vitae? So a curriculum vitae is typically for academia. And so you might have one, you'll definitely use a curriculum vitae to apply to PhD programs. Master's thesis programs, you may or may not. They may say resume or CV. Um, master's non-thesis, I bet is a resume because they tend to be more industry geared. And then I would say as well in med school, I can't speak to law school. I do not know what they do there, but I bet some of them use it. If you're in academia, it's definitely a curriculum vitae. So curriculum vitae are structured a little bit differently. So they are not limited to one page. They are as long as you want them to be. Some people will say they can only be so many pages. So when I submitted my PhD, they said your curriculum vitae could only be so many pages. And it's Latin. It's literally like your life. It's your life in a format. You don't really mess around with formatting. You don't really need to care about white space. This was my very first CV. I think I applied to a summer REU with it. As an undergrad, you really don't have much. Oh, this is from 2016. So this is before, yeah, this was when I applied to this was actually when I applied to the undergraduate research lab that I stayed in. So as an undergrad, if you're asked for a CV, you don't have a ton. At that point, I cut out all my extracurriculars. I'll show you how we include those later. But the most important thing on a CV for STEM is your research experience. So I included my education, that I was Dean's List, that I was an honors, I had an expected graduation date, and what my degree is in. That's really important. It's actually a Bachelor's of Science of chemical engineering, but I don't know that that matters, but I got the word wrong then. And then what was most important were these details where I broke into them more, and then my research interests, and then an honors and awards section. My professional experience didn't matter so much. He did ask me about that, but that didn't go into um, the CV at that point. I don't know that that's necessarily like a make or break it, but it just shows that they're more geared towards research. I'll show you because I only have like my current CV. So, as I told you, my resume, this is a resume from my third year of my PhD, is still one page. My CV is 11. So it just keeps going. And you basically list out everything you've ever done in a CV ever. And most of the time, you don't really care to even have any bullet points on them. So, education and training is a really boring list of my education and training. There's not any fancy formatting. This is my professional address. These are my professional, I have a professional website. I don't update it. Don't check it out. I should update it. It's a summer goal. Every single education or training I've ever received. So I had an internship during my PhD, and that goes on there because it was a formal training program. My professional experience, we also use Roman numerals in curriculum vitae, so they just go straight down. My professional experience is my PhD, that internship, and when I was a process engineer and my undergraduate research. That's the stuff that matters. I cut off like when I was a waitress or a pet playtime coordinator, none of that belongs in there. Then when you have a CV, you have a section typically called honors, awards, and certifications. Again, these are the honors and awards of a graduated PhD, so you definitely do not need to have a full page list. And this, you just list out everything ever. So in 2022, you don't typically include the month, but that depends on if someone has formatting requirements. I was like nominated by MIT as a rising star in chemi. I won a poster prize. I was nominated for these other things. Just anything that has ever occurred to you. I won a service award. I won a travel award. I was nominated for a keynote. It goes in there. I funded proposals, you probably won't have any of these, but if you do something like an undergrad where you maybe like apply for an undergrad, UW has an STF, so it's a student technology fund. That's what this is. I think it's actually fund. Review, comment, check. This is how I update my CV. Whenever I look at it, I leave myself comments. Update to address. Yeah, this is just everything that you've ever won. So this, by the end of your PhD, it just gets to be quite long. You just accumulate things when you've done things for 5 years, proposals, and then in PhDs you have publications. I'm very interdisciplinary, so something that I chose to do was to split my publications based on my field. And also in PhDs you get to give a lot of talks, so I have invited talks, I have normal talks. None of you should have talks. That shouldn't be occurring. Posters we do during grad school, both masters and PhDs, and undergrads you might have some. So you might have a poster category as an undergrad. I think it's great to try and do one or two posters during undergrad. And then I teach this, I teach other classes. I'm interested in being a professor, so I include that. And then we get down to what's probably the most different from resumes. In academia, we consider things service. So service is when you like do things for the university that aren't specifically your job. So in undergrad, you might actually be doing some service. So like things like if you're ever on a committee, like at UW, we have undergrads on our College of Engineering Strategic Planning Committee. We have undergrads that are in like the Student Senate. We have undergrads that were on the faculty search type of things. We include those under service in CVs, which is just like a really obscure category. But I also did service. I like served as a mentor for a BME society. And so I include those things like service to my community. Then I have, because I've done a lot of outreach, I have a different outreach tab. These are, we don't really have an extracurriculars tab on CVs. And then every person that I have ever mentored as well. Memberships, I've expanded my list by, I think, 2. I did a journal review. I appeared in popular media. That's a CV. Your CV does not need to look like that. I don't mean to stress you out. I just mean this is what mine looked like when I was a sophomore in college. And it's just saying it's the beginning of building out a career of like research and academia. So that's kind of an introduction to a lot of complex topics. Any questions? I don't know that's that complex, but any questions there? Cool. I hope that my resume and my CV showed like you don't have, I think most of you have more impressive resumes than I had at this point, that point in my, save my update, in my career. So I hope that doesn't stress you out. Okay, does anyone want to do a live review or do you all want to do one-on-ones? Because what I'll probably do, what I did last year was everyone wanted to do private ones and I created um, a private room. Nandika, you want to do a public one?
No, I just had a really good
Oh
question.
yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I was just wondering if like volunteer experience and everything should go under like professional experience or like extracurriculars.
Yeah, it's really going to depend on how you want to split it. I don't think it's going to make or break anything. I would kind of, it's like a personal decision of intensity. So I have some volunteer experience that I would say was more professional. I like got training, I worked with a group. I like tagged in my hours and stuff. And I have some volunteer experience, which is more of an extracurricular. I did it every once in a while. So that like program that was more, I did a program with a children's hospital. I would include that as professional experience, whereas I did like occasional volunteering at the nearby cardiology unit, and I chose to include that as volunteer experience. But that was how I picked it. It's not gonna make or break your resume. That's one of
Yep.
the like gray areas. Does that
Yeah,
make
makes sense. Thank you.
cool? I don't think anyone wants to do it publicly, which is totally fine. I wouldn't want to either, I assure you. Even showing this to you all now makes me cringe at some of my old stuff. So I'm gonna stop the recording, and then if you want your resume reviewed in the Zoom session, stay on. Otherwise, check out the instructions in hashtag panels and workshops and email me with the correct subject title, and I will get to all of you and I will just send you a track change resume. Um, please email it as a Word doc so I can actually track changes in it. And then if you would like to stay on, then I'll stay on and I'll go one-on-one with you in a breakout room until we're done. Sound good?